me. Right, let's just get this loaded. Right. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are, and welcome to the first session of the Dev Day. My name is Rachel Salby. I'm the coordinator of library discovery platforms at La Trobe University. And this is Peta Hopkins, who's the manager of digital library services at Bond University. And together we're the co-coordinators of the ANZREG program on the ANZREG committee, which is the Australian and New Zealand Regional Ex Libris Users Group. And today we're going to talk about our experience running a Cloud Apps hackathon. I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement of country. We'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we work and live. Pay respects to the elders, past, present, and future. I am on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I pay my respects to them. We'll be taking questions throughout the presentation. Just use that Q&A button down the bottom. And we will have, as indicated earlier, we will have space at the end for questions. Okay, so a little bit of background for those who might not be aware. A hackathon is basically a time-limited event in which people get together, form teams, and work on a project together. It's usually technical, but not always. And the first hackathons were in person, but in time, a lot moved to online. And a bit of trivia for you. The first hackathon was held in 1999. It was the Open BSD conference, and it was held in someone's house, and there was 10 people involved. The Alma Cloud Apps, you're going to be hearing a lot about them this conference, are little add-on tools for Alma that customers can build and add to their Alma instance to improve functionality, and they can be shared throughout the community. They're built using Angular JavaScript, using the Cloud Apps API, which is a REST API. Peter, a little bit more?
Yes, just give you some thoughts as to why we chose to do a hackathon. The ANZREG event, annual event, is usually 3 days, 2 days of conference and 1 day, which is our Developers Day. And with the pandemic last year, of course, we had to change plans and move to a 1 day virtual event. So our developers missed out on their Dev Day. Since they had missed out, we were looking for an event to hold early this year that would engage them, but not just them. It needed to be something that we could do with remote participants and not just be another day of sitting watching webinars all day long. So it was going to be the first of a series of smaller events that we planned for this year.
Thank you. So as Peter indicated, we wanted to give our Australian and New Zealand community something a little bit different, something that was more than just a webinar. So we had two main goals. The first was to develop skills in learning to use the Cloud App platform and all the coding involved. And we were also hoping on this time-limited event that we'd produce some working apps that our users could share throughout the community to improve the Alma experience. But as Peter will tell you, it wasn't just the technical goals we had in mind.
No, so our other goals included cross-institutional collaboration for collaborating and networking. Networking is always something that we focus on at our ANZREG events. So it was no surprise that, that we wanted to make sure we were extending networks as part of this as well. And it was important that we had this mix of users. And I think that was, it was a real mix of roles was important because it was not just the developers, but that gave us some challenges then of how were we going to encourage Alma users to actually sign up to be in a hackathon. So yeah, we had to do a little bit of thinking about that. For example, not just someone who would normally come to our conference, but someone who'd never been to an ANZREG conference before might be someone who'd join up to be participating in the hackathon as well. Rachel?
Yes, and we also wanted to ensure it was relevant. One of the key principles of learning, and something that helps anyone to learn a new skill, is to make it applicable and relevant. So we wanted to offer people something that they could apply to their real world day-to-day jobs. So by developing an app for their Alma, that would help them because they could see the connection between the technology and what they did on a regular basis. These are just a few of the people who were involved. There was the ANZREG committee, me, Peter, and Amelia. There was a wonderful Sue Harmer, who was a guiding member of ANZREG and woman of wisdom, I would say. She was always there to lend a helping hand. And we were really lucky to have a huge team from Ex Libris. They were very helpful. These included not just cloud and development people, but also our Australian representatives, Caitlin and Amelia. And yeah, they were fantastic. It was a great opportunity to get to know Ex Libris people in a different environment. Okay. This is a little snazzy chart, and I'm hoping you'll actually, yes. Thank you, Peter put this together. I thought it was very good. So we initially had the genesis of the idea way back in November, where Peter was thinking about how could we offer something a bit different to our users, something to make up for the Developers Day. And the Cloud Apps platform had just been released, so that was the perfect opportunity. The team began forming and we started meeting regularly and knotting out the nuts and bolts of what we would actually do and how we could get this thing working. We started letting the ANZREG community know in about February that this was coming. And to whet people's appetite, we held a design thinking webinar in late February to get people thinking about if they'd like to participate and what it would involve. The actual event went from March 17th to 24th, and it didn't just end there because we also wanted to know what worked and what we could do differently next time. So we had a wrap-up session, interviews with participants, and a few surveys, not just for participants, but for observers and attendees too. So as I said, we started with trying to plan this event, and we knew from experience and the research that hackathons work better if people have the bare bones of an idea already in mind. So we didn't want people to waste time trying to think of a suitable app. We were going to give people an app to work on, the idea, the bare bones of what it was looking like. To do that, we needed to find some ideas. So we asked the community what they'd like to see. We looked on ideas exchange, NERS voting, and throughout the mailing list to see what ideas were out there that could feasibly be created. We sent these to the Ex Libris Cloud team, who were able to rate them and assess them for both feasibility and how difficult they would be to execute.
I think one other thing we did there too with the ideas, just briefly, was that we talked about them with the rest of the ANZREG committee as well, so that we could get a feel for which ones we thought would be the most important or most useful for our regional area as well. Yeah, that was really handy because there were a few ideas that we found were really wanted in our community. So it was good to get the sort of our fingers on the pulse of what was needed. Okay, a few weeks before, in late February, we held a design thinking UX session.
And this was designed to get users excited and interested in participating, and also get them an idea of what the hackathon would involve and what the Cloud Apps platform was. Now, the timing was well chosen. We chose it with just enough time people could get organised and decide they'd want to participate, but not enough time that they'd lose momentum. Peter, do you want to say a bit more about it?
Yeah, so immediately after the presentation by Alex, Josh Weissman also gave an introduction to the Alma Cloud App Style Guide. And so those two presentations went really well together. And it meant that when our teams got started just a couple of weeks later, that they were already up and running with some of it. So some of that learning was kind of already under their belts. And I think that really helped them as well. And it was also an opportunity for the participants to ask the organisers any questions that they might have and give us a chance to respond to them in the 2 weeks leading up to the launch event.
Yeah, and it was quite good to see the level of enthusiasm. We had a lot of people attend this design thinking workshop, and a lot of people starting to ask questions, people starting to sign up, people emailing us and saying, I'm interested. So it was really good to see. When you plan an event like that, you're never quite sure what the level of engagement was, but I think both Peter and I were taken aback by how many people were interested. And it was a busy time of year and people were doing it online. So I think we were very pleased with how much enthusiasm there was. I mean, we're not a huge community, Australia and New Zealand. So we had about, I think, over 20 people were interested, and we ended up with 19 people participating. So on March the 17th of this year, 19 eager hackathoners attended the big launch session. It was there they'd learned what of the 4 teams they'd been placed into. As Peter said, we tried to make the 4 teams equally balanced, and we tried to ensure each team had at least one developer and a subject matter expert. And it was a nice mix of skills, institutions, and experience. We also told each team what app they'd been assigned to, and we did try to match apps with relevance and experience. A little bit tricky because you don't always know what experience people have, but we thought we did a pretty good job of that. At the launch session, they also learned a bit about what we were expecting, about sort of the end product and how there would be prizes at the end for the winning teams, and what we'd really be looking for in terms of usability and design. We also gave people a pretty clear understanding of exactly what was expected over the week and what support they would have. So we introduced the organising committee and contacts, told them a bit about the Slack and the drop-ins, which we'll talk about a little bit more, and what they could expect. Then it was time for the teams to break out and meet each other. Every team was mixed up of different institutions, so we didn't have more than one person from the same place. So I think in nearly all cases, people got to meet new people. There hadn't really been that there hadn't really been that in-person engagement over the past year because of COVID and lockdowns. So a lot of people were meeting others for the very first time. And we had a bit of fun. We asked all the teams to come up with a name, and we had some very fun, creative team names like Slippy Slips. And the teams sort of talked together about how they'd best communicate and how they'd work and who would do what. Then they all came back into the main room, and it was there they could ask any questions of the organisers and the Cloud Apps people that they might have. Peter, you've got a bit more about this.
I think you covered it pretty well there. I will just say in organising the breakout rooms, we were very fortunate to be able to use IGeLU's webinar account. And because we had used that when people registered, we'd ask them questions like, what are your skills? If you're a developer, what level would you describe yourself as? What would you be bringing to it? So, well, I don't know anything about development, but I could do testing, or I'm a subject expert in resource sharing. So we had that sort of information at hand as we sort of worked out who was going to be on which team. And it meant that we could also look at teaming up where we had two developers, someone who was more experienced and someone who was just starting out on it. So those were some of the things. And then because we were using the Zoom webinar, we were able to pre-assign everyone into their teams for the breakout meeting. So that was all organised ahead of the actual time. So it was just a moment's click of the button, really, for everyone to go into those breakout teams.
Participants were supported very strongly throughout the week. We had a Slack channel where they could ask any questions they might have of the Ex Libris cloud team. And sorry. Yes, handing over to Peter here.
Sorry, Rachel. And we had connected, this Slack channel already existed prior to our event, of course, on Alma Cloud Apps. And so I had connected on there and asked the people who were already there if they would be happy for us to use that channel. And they were quite happy for us to do that. So I just gave them a little heads up that our event is starting. So you might see quite a lot of conversation happening on here. And I think it's quite good because now the learnings from our event are actually still available there for anyone else who's now working on Alma Cloud Apps and using that channel. Some of our teams also set up their own channels just so that they could confer privately as they were working on them as well. And I think, you know, using Slack was a new tool for some of our participants who had never done any development work. For example, from Bond, we had someone from our customer services team who was quite unsure about whether she could join a hackathon, but she did so, became a great tester and user, and participated. So learning about Slack, a new way of collaborating online, was a useful thing for some of those people as well.
We also had support in the form of daily drop-ins. There's Josh from the Cloud Apps team. And these were held every day in the afternoon for Australia, New Zealand, and very early morning for Israel. So we're very fortunate that the Cloud Apps team were willing to attend. And these were a chance, again, to ask maybe the more technical questions of the Cloud App people. And they were also a good opportunity for, we found that there was a lot of people asking questions of each other teams. Peter, that was something we were really pleased to see.
It was, because one of our, when we were planning, one of the things we had talked about was whether we should be looking at a competitive kind of hackathon or a collaborative one. And we really wanted to have collaborative winning out over competition. So even though that we did have some incentives and prizes, it was really good to see the teams able to share ideas and learnings between themselves, as well as being able to ask the experts. So I think the drop-in sessions were really appreciated as well.
Finally, after 1 week of hard coding and practicing and presenting, it was time for the big launch of the event wrap-up. This was held on March 24th and was highly attended by quite a lot of people, not just in Australia and New Zealand, but throughout the world. We had quite a few international attendees, and the YouTube video has been watched a number of times. So basically, it was a chance for each team to introduce themselves, what they've been doing, some of the challenges they've faced, and some of their successes, and then demonstrate their app. We had some very creative demonstrations. It was a very interesting and exciting event, and everyone knew there would be some prizes awarded as well. We not just had a judge's choice, but we also had a People's Choice Award. And we were very thankful that Ex Libris sponsored the prizes in the form of vouchers for all the winning team members.
So our judging panel, we felt we needed some expertise on there, on Alma Cloud Apps, as well as some regional and library expertise to judge them. Our panel was made up of Josh Wiseman from Ex Libris, Kate Bardwell and Stacey Bangrol from our ANZREG committee. And neither Kate nor Stacey had been directly involved in the planning. And we had no participants from their institutions either, so they were completely independent when adjudicating. They met previously to work through what the criteria would be, and we used an online form for them to assign points throughout the team presentations. And then at the end, they could easily view the results of how they'd all voted and record their feedback for them as well. For the People's Choice Award, we used Poll Everywhere. At the end of the team presentations, we invited the audience to complete the poll, and we asked Caitlin Grammer from ProQuest Ex Libris to say a few words, and that gave us enough time for the judges to be able to confer on the brief feedback that they would give as part of this event and to check that the results for point scoring. After the event, we did send more detailed feedback from the judging panel to all the teams as well. So they got all of the feedback that they could. We were very fortunate that we had two different teams win. But if you're planning an event like this, I recommend that you have a bit of a think about what you're going to do if the same team wins both awards. Fortunately, we didn't have to worry about that. The other thing, in addition to the vouchers, we also used digital badges, which we sent out to the winning teams. In fact, all the participants did receive a digital badge for participating as well. And we used Badger for that.
Thank you. And the judge's choice went to delete your sets. If you're like me and you've used Alma for a while, you've probably built up quite a few sets. And previously you had to delete them individually. Well, that problem exists no more. You can bulk delete your sets and choose which sets to include and which not to include in this wonderful, easy to use app. The judges thought it was well designed, very easy to use, and was very beneficial to Alma workflows. It's a great tool for anyone who uses Alma regularly, especially user managers, repository workers, and system administrators. And the People's Choice went to Print Slip Report. The out-of-the-box Alma Print Slip Report is a little clunky and doesn't always have the fields you need, or sometimes contains too many fields. With the Print Slip Report, you get to choose what fields are included on this. So it's very good for any collection maintenance, holds, requests, and interlibrary loan. And I have to say the judges thought very highly of this too. A very popular app that just missed out was our Trove Search app. This was very popular with both the people and the audience and the judges, and it's one of the most popular cloud apps that's been installed in Australia. I don't know the exact stats, but it was very high on the list, as were the other two. So this one allows you to search items in your Alma instance in the Australian National Bibliographic Database, or Trove. It uses both the Alma API and the Trove API, and it's really good for last copy in Australia, or improving your metadata or bib record quality, or for interlibrary loan and resource sharing. And Peter, do you want to just talk about the other app that was developed?
Yeah, so we had one more app, which was looking at doing citation checking. And this would, the idea for this one was about looking at, say, resource sharing requests that had come in with incorrect metadata and been rejected. And so it was meant to be a tool that people could use to look it up and see, oh, I've got the date wrong, or the ISSN is wrong, or something like that. And the other use case was for citations that might be used for course reserve. Unfortunately, that poor team ended up losing 1 or 2 people at the beginning. You know, life happens and people had to withdraw. And so they were under-resourced, unfortunately. And I think there was some complexity there as well that meant that one didn't quite get over the line, but really useful talking through that with the team to see what challenges they had, which will help us plan for future events. And also when we're thinking about future Alma Cloud apps as well.
Thank you. So we did quite a bit of reflection with the participants, and we also did a few surveys and interviews because we really wanted to see what worked well and what could have been improved. And there were a few common themes. So the week was a really good length. Anything shorter and it would have been a much more stressful and quite painful experience. Anything longer and they wouldn't have actually had more time, because what usually happens is the expectations go up. So you feel like you have to create this huge flashy whiz bang app. People really liked having 5 to 6 participants. The teams that had 5 participants said it was the right size, right mix of people, and it meant different tasks could be done by different people. The drop-in sessions were really well regarded. They were really popular. I think most people came to all 5, and they were half an hour, and they always went over time. They were that popular. And people also appreciated having the app idea in advance. So not having to think of an app and have to think it would be feasible and how difficult it would be. There were a couple of suggestions of things we could do differently next time. And if you're running a hackathon, you might want to think about it. So we said that people liked being given an app, but what people wanted was probably an opportunity to choose from a list of apps, because I think there was at least one team that changed their app because the one we'd given them, they didn't have the subject expertise and they couldn't really see what we were asking them for. And as we said, 5 to 6 people is ideal. Probably at the higher end, I'd say 6, and just plan for dropouts, because as Peter said, life happens. And we had one team that had 2 people drop out and they ended up with 3. And I think it was quite difficult because there just wasn't enough people. So do think of even having some people on a wait list or backup if need be. One thing that we did find was AngularJS is quite a difficult platform to learn, and we thought we should have had maybe a preparation session. Even experienced coders said they struggled a bit with Angular, and at least a couple of people said they spent the first 2 days just trying to get Angular to work. So yes, a separate session probably would have been good. We do want to say you need to reiterate the message. You want it collaborative, not competitive. You want it to be fun and not sort of cutthroat. So do keep reiterating that it isn't just about the winning. It's about not just the journey, but about learning how to use cloud apps. And even if they learn nothing more than how to use an Alma API. So it can actually be good to get to a point and go, this app isn't going to work, or this app is too difficult. And especially if you document it, so people looking at it in the future will go, oh, okay, that's the difficulty they had in doing that. And finally, presenting live on Zoom is a little bit nerve-wracking, as we all know, and technical glitches happen. So we probably would recommend having a practice session for all the presenters, or even considering pre-recording the team presentation. So just one less thing they have to stress about. So Peter, was there anything else you had to say?
I think you've covered it really well there, Rachel, on that slide, so that's good.
Yep, so this brings us to the end of our formal presentation. ANZREG is the Australian and New Zealand Regional Ex Libris Users Group, and we have representatives from state and national libraries, school libraries, health libraries, and higher education libraries. In the hackathon, we had a few different mix of libraries, which was good. We had good representation from our state and national libraries, and also from our university libraries. and we represent the users and act as a liaison between them and Ex Libris. And we'd love to hear from you if you are interested in running a similar event, and we can talk to you more a bit in detail, and we may have some documents we can share. So, Peter, any final words before we throw open to questions?
No, I think that's it, Rachel. I'm happy to, if there's any questions, we can tackle them now.
Okay, there's not any questions yet, but feel free to ask anything you might have. And obviously that's our contact details if you think of something later, or if you're watching this later on, you can certainly send us an email and we'd be happy to answer.
A couple of minutes. Just wait a couple of minutes for questions and then. Are you planning to have another hackathon, or was this a one-off?
Well, at this stage, it's a one-off, but we not looking too far ahead because we do want to offer some different sort of topics this year. But we think it went well, and so we'd certainly consider it for a future, maybe next year. Or we'd be interested in talking with other regional user groups as well to see whether something more international might be of interest as well.
I don't think there will be any other questions. So if there are, then you can contact Rachel and Peta, or contact us and we'll forward the questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.